Hello, hello. Welcome back to Let's Talk Ray Bradbury, the playlist on Let's Talk where we discuss the fiction of Ray Bradbury, generally in the form of short story reviews. Today I want to talk about And the Rock Cried Out, a 1953 short story set in a fictional 1960s. Lenora and John Webb are Americans traveling in third world South America, presumably, someplace Latin America. It's not definitely determined. When they hear that the white world has blown itself all to hell with nuclear war during what was, of course, then the Cold War. With the protection of their world power gone, they find themselves unable to get out of the country. The locals are emboldened. They don't feel like there's a American army to come retaliate if one of their citizens is killed. They go to a border crossing station. They try to bribe the agents. The agents take their money, but don't let them across. Soon after, they go to a gas station. They need more gas. The attendant says, "Oh well, I can't sell you gas, but I can let you leave your car here, and I'll protect it while you go somewhere else where someone has gas." Instead, he steals the car and drives it on into town. On the way to town, they do meet a kindly old man who tells a little story about his past, about how he once wished that he had invented a sort of virtual reality machine where a man could see through the eyes of another man, walk in another man's shoes, and then that would take care of all the world's hate and bigotry. But he lets them out. They go to town where they meet, or they go to a hotel where they'd once stayed before. The innkeeper is kind to them because they did him a favor many years ago. But he can only keep them there for one night safely unless they decide to work for him instead. And under his protection, they'll get 2 pesos a day, but they can never leave because the angry mob outside will kill them. So, by this point in the story, they've been stripped of everything they have but themselves, and they decide that that has to be enough, so they decide to leave and go and risk the mob, but we never actually see what happens to them. Does the mob attack them, or do they make it through past the front lines of the mob to where you always, in any protest, there are silent people behind who are not ready to do evil things, whereas up front people are always a little bit crazier, a little bit more rash and willing to go the distance as far as their hate goes. Frightening story. Feels all too relevant still today. In this world where we're constantly being divided over racial lines and gender lines and national lines and all this border shit going on between Mexico and the U.S. these days, it really does. Here's a story that was written sort of as a parable for the Cold War, which is over, but here we are, decades later, still dealing with the same fight where we have a president, no matter what you think about him, but he's repeatedly calling people who live in other countries inferior, saying these countries are shitholes and blaming them for all of our problems. And it really speaks to that current event, if anything else. Really, the moral of the story here is we need to treat each other more respectfully, because you never know what's going to happen when sometime maybe the tables will be turned and we will need a helping hand that we're going to wish that we had given. But there's also, it's not one-sided. It's not all about the white man being the big evil. There's also a underlying thread about a lot of these local people in this location being basically convinced that America and Russia and all these other big nations were their oppressors. However, it basically states that, they're never going to be any happier because there will always be another oppressor. So it's not just a matter of getting rid of the top dog, but also taking care of your own house. But then the other overarching theme here, the core of the story, is this idea that this couple, the Webbs, stage by stage, act by act in this story, they're stripped of money, possession, dignity and feelings of superiority and surety and comfort and all of these things. And but each time they lose something, they immediately grab onto something else, and suddenly, where simply getting out of the country was going to be enough, suddenly they have their car, but then they lose their car, and so we have our feet, and then so on down the line till they have nothing, not even their luggage, but they have each other, and the story never gets to this point, but the presumption as the story ends is basically what happens now. Do we die together? Do we separate? Is one life more important than the other? And I think it seemed to indicate that they were going to stay together to the end. So ultimately, it is our human relations, our relationships, our family, one-on-one relationships that are the core essential heart of being human, which is the core of any story. All right, guys, that is my interpretation of "And the Rock Cried Out," which I should add is a reference to a poem shown in the story that says, "I went to the rock to hide my face, and the rock cried out, no hiding place. There's no hiding place down here." I'm not sure if that's a Bradbury original or if that came from somewhere else. I do know that it's also a title of a Babylon 5 episode. Don't ask me why I remember that. But in this case, it is really the probably the kernel that this story was built around, I have to believe. But it's a good one. Great little quote that really drives this story. So, yeah, guys, if you love Bradbury, come back soon. We'll be doing more Ray Bradbury reviews. I've got about 100 more Ray Bradbury stories to talk about here on Let's Talk. So please subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.